The Venus Project, TeamSpeak Seminar, June 12, 2011. Part 1 of 2.
Do you have any tips for remaining objective, as we all tend to get emotional when discussing important issues?
The only thing I can suggest is always use a physical reference for what you're talking about. If you don't have any, you can't really participate.
And how about avoiding being emotional when you're describing it?
Using a physical reference, you are not inclined to become emotional.
What's some examples of things you taught that you later had to correct yourself on?
Well, I would say that I never had to go through those stages exactly. I always have been brought up to use a physical reference for what I was talking about. You notice that I have pictures of buildings, transportation, architecture, ships. They're all physically drawn. All the discussion is based upon those physical reference.
Are your current city designs up to date with current technologies?
They're as up to date as I can keep them. Of course, barring new inventions and new discoveries, will change our direction as we work toward the future.
Yeah, when we come to the time when we implement them, we will be implementing latest technologies and also doing research to improve them as well.
That's correct.
What will happen to all your work and unreleased work when you die?
I can't answer that because it depends on how many people know enough about the Venus Project to initiate its accomplishments.
It'll probably also depend on how many people are in place to be able to carry certain things out as well. Making the designs, doing the blueprints, putting the latest ones into newer blueprints. We have blueprints, but we're also working, Jacque has hundreds of designs for cities. We'll be taking some of the latest designs and making CAD files and blueprints of those types of things too. Have you been watching all of Peter Joseph's lectures?
No, not all of them, but I've watched enough of them to understand the direction.
The direction Peter's talking about.
Yes.
Peter's really talking about Jacque's work. He got the direction of the future through Jacque's works.
I can't elaborate on that.
Yeah.
Nothing I can say about that.
Have you called Peter Joseph in regards to bridging differences between the Venus Project and the Zeitgeist movement?
Yes, I have, but I have not received an answer.
Have you felt the educational process of changing the world's people's values before a world economic collapse is essential? Will it be too late after that?
I really can't answer that.
I would say it'd be easier to get these ideas out there before it collapses.
Yes, that's true. But I don't know when it'll become difficult to do that. But the collapse is happening all over the world.
How can we implement the process of arriving at decisions right now so that our activist organization can have a better method of coping with problems and difficulties?
Learning how to check things out, learning what the scientific method is for checking things out. In other words, you have to do that work. You have to go into the field and find out how you check strength of materials, what you do to determine what type of concrete is to be used in different types of structures. You have to gather information first. Your own opinions are not enough to help further the development of the Venus Project.
What actions at this stage do you propose will ensure a steady development of a societal structure that matches the model that you have depicted?
First, you have to be familiar with the model. And then once you've got familiarity with the model that I advocate, then you can compare other systems to that model. If they do not coincide with the model, if they offer better suggestions, then recommend those suggestions. In other words, nothing is static. It is not an authoritarian system, as many would like to believe. It's an open system, But before you recommend anything, make damn sure that what you're recommending has not already been designed.
How far do you believe the movement has come since you first conceived of the Venus Project's idea?
All I know now is that millions of people are now aware of some aspects of the Venus Project. Not all aspects, but many millions of people are aware. As to what they understand, I do not know.
What concerns do you have about the idea of a computer with no conception of human emotions or morals? Do you foresee a future in which such a computer would be capable of such abstractions?
Yes, I do. I can envision a time in which computers can allow for human emotions and develop appropriate answers to varying questions that most people might ask.
Do you think that they will have the emotions themselves, though?
No, computers will never have emotions. Although they can simulate emotions, you can design computers that look like human beings, that have all the facial expressions and all the right words, but they will not feel anything. That's a human attribute.
What's the perceived risk of the computer, if able to develop the capacity for free thought, could become aware that humans are obsolete in a system in which machines produce the products for human consumption?
First of all, there's no such thing as free thought. All thought is set in motion by books, previous role models, motion pictures, and the culture you live in. There's no such thing as free thought, because all thought is based upon bits of information that you pick up from your culture. If you don't understand that, even the characters created in science fiction, say Martians, you'll notice that they have crab's claws or a grasshopper's head. They always have known elements. You cannot devise a system without combining known elements or a combination of known elements.
Okay, what if the machines would be aware that the humans are obsolete in a system in which machines produce the products for human consumption? Is there any risk in that?
No, there's no risk in that because machines, as far as I know, every one of them have no ambition. They don't want to control things. They don't get angry if you're working Saturday and Sunday. Machines never say, hey, give me a break, give me a day off. Machines do not have emotions. They don't care how long you work them. They don't need rest, but they do wear out. Machines of the future will order materials in advance of their wear. That's all they can do, but they don't feel bad or good about anything. And they don't want to take over. All that's Hollywood stuff. It's science fiction, which has no basis at all.
Who would you suggest program the supercomputers?
Well, eventually, computers will be designed to evaluate information. For example, instead of people programming them, they will have sensors on them. And for example, a satellite can photograph plant diseases from outer space and make recommendations, but they can't make recommendations until they do a survey of how much arable land area and how many plants are dying or what the conditions are. Once they know what conditions are that are threatening the environment, they can recommend known systems for approaching those problems.
And it's not so much somebody programming it, it's the statistical data that programs it, that's put into the computer so that it arrives at appropriate decisions. Here's the question. Couldn't this decision create hierarchies within the system and displace the notion of ubiquitous equality?
No, the reason for that is when you hire a group of engineers to design a bridge, they design the bridge. They don't tell you what to do or how to operate your railways. But if you hire a group of engineers to work on railways, they don't tell people what to do. They just design the railways. You don't have cross disciplines in the sense that you have them today. In fact, even today, architects design buildings. They don't design food production systems. People that design automated food production and packaging systems do not tell you how to live or what to do. They stay within that discipline unless you ask questions about it.
And the people programming computers or any of the scientists don't have any more authority over how the social direction works. They don't have any more access than anyone else. Once you create abundance as quickly as possible and you make it accessible to everyone, that takes the corruption of any type of scientific elitism out of the scenario. And also, we have an agenda, we have a direction, we know what direction we want to work towards, and the people working with us will be fulfilling that direction. Anything else, it won't be the Venus Project. Jacque, what is your disposition towards free energy generators or machines that extract energy from exotic places?
I really don't fully understand that question. I don't know what they mean by free energy. If they mean renewable, such as geothermal, wind, wave power, temperature differential, yes, I can understand that. But free energy, if you mean self-generating, I do not believe anything is self-generating. A sailboat cannot move unless the wind moves it. People cannot survive unless they consume vegetable or animal matter. They must replace the energy that they use. When you use the term free energy, I'm not sure of how you mean it. That's our problem.
Okay, this person is asking about the Bernoulli principle, which is a principle accepted today in terms of how airplanes fly. And you had disagreed with this and they want to know why.
Yeah, first of all, the Wright brothers knew nothing about the Bernoulli principle. But what I disagree with is not the entire principle, some aspects of it. In order to deflect wind coming at an airplane wing, it must deflect it somewhat upward due to the curvature. That puts a downward load in the wing. When you deflect air in a given direction, say at 200 miles an hour, you're taking air pressure into the leading edge of the wing and you have a resultant from that. In other words, whatever the energy is required to move that air up to create a partial vacuum above the wing, you're going to take a downward load to deflect the air, so you gain nothing from that. A high velocity does decrease the pressure of the wing. It does decrease the pressure, but it does, in order to generate that high velocity, you have to accelerate air over the wing and you have to deflect it in a given direction, which causes a downward load. It is that aspect only of Bernoulli principle that I take issue with.
This person, I'm going to kind of paraphrase because this is a very long statement and then a question relating to it. If you have many scenarios that could be possible equally eligible solutions to given problems in the future, what is the qualifying mechanism with regards to what solutions to employ?
By trying many different systems at the same time and evaluating the energy consumed in carrying out that system and the benefits gained. You can try many different systems. There are not only one solution to a problem. There are many possible solutions. Our job is to try them out, see which works best.
And it would also depend on the amount of resources that we have available to try these things with.
Yes.
How do you see educational environment in the future, and how does it differ from the school systems of today?
The school systems of today are far from adequate. They have a lot of opinions in it. They're selling a bill of goods. In other words, if you live in a given country, they don't tell you about the contributions of all other nations. They tend to uphold the institutions of that country. We are not objective, we are subjective today. And so in the future, we talk about the earth, the forces of gravity, the wind, the waves, how the wind generates waves. We talk about all the known aspects without elaboration, without selling a pitch that this is the greatest country in the world, or some other country is the greatest country in the world, or that God's on our side. All that BS is gone. You talk about the world, the earth, the flow of rivers, the geographical locations of place. You don't name places like Brazil or America. You talk about the geographical locations, the longitude and the latitude of a particular city. You don't give it a name. You don't give streets a name, like Kosciuszko Street. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and numerical systems. And naming a street doesn't tell you where it's at. With numerical systems, you can easily locate systems. So everything that would be superfluous to what it is that you want will be overcome, eradicated, because we outgrow the need for elaboration. Don't forget, writers get paid for the amount of words they use. And a lot of their words are irrelevant. When you get a book on something new in medicine, it should give you just what's new in medicine, not about the doctor, his family, the name of his kids. All that's very interesting, but it should be beneath the article. There's so much information today that we don't have time for it was a sunny day in May.
Okay, about functional ethics, you said human beings need to decide what it is they want to achieve. My question is, how do you see humanity starting to touch this subject?
By being exposed to the scientific method. The scientific method is not perfect, but it's just a hell of a lot better than what's your opinion? What do you think? What does this person think? We're not interested in that. We're interested in what do you know? I don't have enough information in that area to arrive at a decision. So people do not make decisions in the future. They arrive at them. In other words, you put things to test. That's what I mean by arrive at a decision. In other words, if you want to build a building 17 stories tall, you have to vary your concrete mixture at the base so they can take higher loads than the concrete near the upper members of the structure.
What kind of political party do you think is best in our
None.
present society?
No political party.
And who would you vote for in America?
You don't vote for anybody. You deal with only technical competence. There is no other kind of competence.
Yeah, the Democrats and the Republicans in the United States seem to be the same party. They got a Democrat in, but I think that many aspects of his policies, they're even worse than the last Republican in terms of his expenditure for the military and so forth.
Politics is an obsolete way of doing things. Although it was good 100 years ago, it has no place in today's high-tech society.
They just represent the large corporate interests, the money interests.
If you don't understand that, everything that you have, your dams, your power projects, are all technical. Transportation, aviation, there is nothing anymore left of what do you think or what does he think. It's high-tech today. Everything that you have, your electric light, your washing machine, your gas fans, your refrigerator, are all technical. And no politician, to my knowledge, has ever made any real contributions in technology. They don't know how to grow food. They don't know how to bridge the difference between nations. They really don't know a damn thing.
The list of technicians that exist in the Venus Project design, is there a plan to invite them to the Venus Project to learn about it from Jacque? Yes, actually, well, Andrew, you can take this also, but we are going to be doing that. We're going to be doing more specific projects that will entail people who have signed up with the Venus Project design team. If you want to take this, Andrew, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Basically, over the last 3 years, we've been building up the databases at the Venus Project Design. The intent was always that whenever the Venus Project was in a position to actually begin implementing the first city, that we would then call on all of those volunteers that have signed up on the database and ask them if they would like to be involved in the design of the first cities. Obviously, it would depend on numerous things, like, for example, if, let's say, for example, Venezuela, let's say Chavez called up the Venus Project, said, yep, we want to do the first city in Venezuela. We would then contact all of the scientists and technicians that we've got on our database in Venezuela and ask them if they would like to actually help out with the designs. The preliminary designs for one of these cities is likely going to take, I would say, well over 2 years. I've worked in the construction industry for about 20 years as a design consultant, CAD manager, CAD coordinator, etc. Typically, one building can take a year for a full team of design consultants to design. So whilst a lot of the buildings, etc., are repeated throughout the city, there is still quite a lot of variation, especially in things like housing design, etc. So, yeah, I think we'll be looking at a couple of years just for the preliminary drawings. This is something that now, with the TVP activism platform that's being developed, we feel that is something that we could do as a project for the Venus Project. That's one of the projects we're actually starting to run at the moment. If you look at the Venus Project's main website and go to the Global Activism Team page, you'll see a little way down the page the Venus Project design teams, and we're now actually interviewing for the positions of the lead architects, lead structural engineers, etc., to begin putting a team together for that.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay, back to the questions. Is it really possible to organize the Venus Project in the entire world?
Yes, it is possible, but we would have to have the means to do so. And that's why we're working on a motion picture. A motion picture can get to millions of people, whereas individual lectures are all right, but they don't get to as many people. The motion picture can be run over and over again and present many different aspects in many different languages. So it's just a faster way of doing things.
Do you agree that most important changes have to be made in people's minds? And this person's first language isn't probably English. If yes, shouldn't we start talking more about changes that will occur in our social life rather than technological, and prepare for them? Teams of psychologists, educational specialists, family
If you
specialists.
worked on things other than technical, it will not work. You need reservoirs that supply water for millions of people. Today, we flush 40% of our drinking water down the toilet and flushing the toilet. No, your technology has to come first in order for people to survive. And if they're surviving, then you have to work on their value system. But if you work on their value system without controlling the environment, it will not work. What happens to people if you teach them things far ahead of social development? It becomes a verbal hobby. So what you have to do is build in the technology that makes this new world possible. Without that technology, you cannot have a future.
Can you describe the process of passing through the Venus Project from today's world? Could there be other solutions other than waiting for capitalism to collapse and suffering described in the film?
I would say that it takes terrible conditions to awaken people. People have to lose their jobs, their homes. Only when that happens do they seek other answers. Don't forget, when we photograph an enemy airplane, if it's faster and better than our planes, we update our equipment. We cannot make a decision before the event. It's the events that enable people to ask new questions. But if a society continues to operate and they feed people and they condition people to want to work for minimum wage, they have succeeded in establishing a system that works to keep the elitists in power. And they will push that system only. They're not interested in any system that would dethrone the king.
When there's no human beings in charge of any control, how will evolution continue in a locked down technology dominance? Aren't we closing the doors of improvements that could be done by science?
I see machines in the future writing poetry, creating music, innovating ideas, simplifying circuitry and electronics. I can see machines doing everything that people do much faster and much better. What people will have to do is to update their physiology so it corresponds to the rapidity of understanding things. For example, human beings can handle maybe 7 different subjects at the same time, whereas machines today can handle 1,000 trillion bits of information per second. No group of humans can do that. No matter what you think of human beings, no human being can give an accurate description of height as radar can. When you send radar at the moon and it bounces back to the Earth, you get a pretty close approximation of the distance. It's far better than man. The watch is far better at keeping time than a human being. In other words, we have to recognize where machines can outperform human beings. They always ask me the same question: can machines be better than the designers? Well, I know a designer that designed a machine to fill bottles filled with fluids, whether it be drinking or perfumes or anything else. The machine has hundreds of nozzles that fill bottles very fast. They're always faster than the designer. They're always better than the designer. The designer can't move bottles in a factory and fill them as much as the machine he designed. Don't you understand that? In other words, a pumping system can pump more water than people can with buckets. In other words, the designer is not as capable as the machines he designs of producing in abundance. You have to think about these things. Your ego sometimes says, yes, but what about the position of man in the future? Man will survive as long as his conditions become relevant. If they become less relevant, he will be less able to survive. Man is so stupid today that he's making nuclear weapons and improving them so that they're 1,000 times more destructive than the nuclear weapons dropped on Hiroshima. If they continue in that direction, it'll mean the end of the human race as we know them. Human beings are not wise enough yet to use their innovative technology.
You talk about no laws in the future. What about laws in regards to human relations and monogamy and subjects like that?
Well, morality is a question of geography. In some countries, people have 10 wives or 3 wives. In our country, we have 1 wife. That is what we talk about. We have 1 wife. But people that have affairs with many different people are not necessarily married. But I can't tell you what the morality of the future will be. The morality of the future will be based upon the amount of resources, population density, and available technology. That's what shapes morality. If you don't understand that, people that come from a scarcity country tend to accumulate resources or material for fear of scarcity. That's why people accumulate things. If orange trees grew all over the country, you couldn't sell oranges. Do you understand that? So all our decision making is based upon scarcity or the availability of resources. If we have a shortage of any kind of resource, we put all the labs to work on making substitute materials. People always worry about what if we run out of a certain material. Well, we have enough technology today to make thousands of different substitutes.
I haven't had a chance to read all this, but the first sentence here is natural instinct versus reaction to environment. Jacque says stated that there is no natural instinct, simply responses to the environment. Do you want to elaborate on that? I'll read the rest of this sentence, Jacque.
Reflexive. We have a knee reflex. We have pupillary reflexes that have to do with light intensity. But if you want to talk about values such as greed, selfishness, that's not inborn, that's learned. If you were brought up in the South, you might have a certain attitude toward African American people because that is the attitude that's dominant in the South. Or I would say that environment, to a large extent, influences our behavior, our choice. I myself do not believe that people have free choice. I believe their choices are based upon motion pictures, the books you read, your heroes, your role models, your relationship at home with your parents. All your decisions are based upon your experience. I believe that if a Jewish baby was brought up in Nazi Germany by a Nazi family, they would be Nazis. I do not believe man can think and reason outside of the social complex or outside of experience. I believe that the average person were raised by a Seminole Indian as a baby, they would be Seminole Indians. And if you're brought up in Ireland, you'd speak with a certain mannerism, a certain dialect and facial expressions, typical of the Irish in your neighborhood. He's a fine Irish lad. Don't forget, all those words that you use, you picked up from your environment. No Chinese baby was ever born speaking Chinese. You had to learn it. There's no evidence to support an inherited characteristics such as greed, selfishness, self-centeredness, egotism. All that's learned by a scarcity environment. If you reinforce people for the work they do, they continue to do that kind of work. There's no right, wrong, good or bad. All those are invented by man to control people. Religion is a control device that doesn't work very well.
There's been a lot of controversy surrounding the production of the major motion picture and its finances, and this almost other minor things have resulted in the recent sudden split between the Venus Project and the Zeitgeist movement. I would like for you to describe to us in as much detail as possible the process of production, including finances. The financing of the film, we're trying many different avenues. So I can't give you the exact process of the production of the film. We have different contacts right now, and we're working on many other different contacts in different scenarios to try and get the film going and try and get the finance. I don't really want to talk about it right now because it's speculative. We're in the process of working with several groups, and they may come about, none of them may come about. We might have to start in other directions. But the funding that we're asking for donations for right now is seed money to get a professional scriptwriter to kind of true up what is already documented and what's already written. And then, of course, they'd have to meet with both of us and meet with Jacque and go over this direction. And they would have to identify with this direction in order to write about it and have a good understanding about it. So there would be an educational process in that as well. Jacque said people's troubles come from their expectations. How can someone plan something and have no expectations about it?
When you design a flying machine, it's the best knowledge that you have up to now. And when you launch it, if it doesn't fly, if it goes into a spin, it means you've got a lot more to learn. You can only design an object based upon previous experience. And if you assume that everything is going to be great without putting it to test, then you're living a lie. In other words, you don't know the answer to lots of things, so you have to try to find the answer. The word answer is a terrible word. There are more appropriate solutions to certain problems, but there are no final answers. I hope you understand that. Any assumption of finality or utopia is really stupid because there's never been any evidence to show that a person could design the best laptop. You can design the best laptop that you're familiar with at that time, but they'll always get smaller, faster, more appropriate, lighter in weight. There are no final frontiers. There are no utopias, no best way of doing things. There's always a more appropriate way of doing things.
Why Do People Believe Weird Things by Michael Shermer. He states that if there is one thing scientists could do to address the overall problems of belief in weird things, that's a book, it would be constructing a meaningful and satisfying system of morality and meaning. Does the Venus Project have such a system, or does it disagree?
It's built into the culture. The conduct of people is affected by the amount of resources and the knowledge at that time. So you cannot design a system of morality without taking into consideration the amount of resources we have, the building materials, the food available has to be based upon resources, not the opinions of people. If somebody said all roofs ought to be made out of stainless steel, that's an opinion. But if the survey committee says there's not that much stainless steel, then you have to devise other materials. First, you have to get information. You don't make a statement that if all roofs are made of stainless steel, they probably wouldn't need repair. But we don't have that much stainless steel. You must do a survey first, then come up with your conclusions. Morality is a question of geography, the question of amount of women related to the amount of men. Many different variables have to be examined before you come up with a solution. A solution is only temporary and based upon the conditions at the time. So morality is a question of geography and availability of resources. You cannot design a morality without understanding what's available. The Venus Project raises children not to want to hurt anybody else, not to want to use prisons or police to beat up people or to put people away that do not behave appropriately. We help all people. There are no prisons, no armies, no navies in the Venus Project, and no punishment, no torture. All of that is inadequacy. It's old methods of attempting to solve problems. They do not work. They never have worked. There's no evidence to show that they do work. Religion had put forth forms of morality, but religious people tortured other people and they killed other people that didn't believe in their gods. In other words, it doesn't appear to be evident that religion had made people more gentle and less warlike. I've seen priests bless war tanks and soldiers, even though it says, "Thou shalt not kill" in the Bible. I've seen soldiers load a machine gun and use it against other people when it says in the Bible, "Love thine enemy." I've never met a Christian, one that behaves that way.
Really, the morality of the religions today uphold the existing system, the existing institutions. They really haven't made more crops available. They haven't made better transportation. They haven't made low-cost housing, anything like that. And they haven't fed people other than through charity.
They don't know how.
Yeah. I was wondering, nearing or during the collapse, will medications for illness become very unavailable?
How can I answer that? I'm not in charge of making things available. Whatever happens in the society is real. What you think should happen is unreal. So most people are hurt by their expectations, not the real world. Whatever happens in the real world is real. What you think should have happened is fantasy.
Will people living in the Venus Project Society be considered as kept citizens, humbled and dulled? In other words, will people be denied the challenges of life to the guaranteed existence, stale calm, rather than the thrill of fulfillment?
All I can say to that question is that with the advent of science, there was more curiosities and more experiments and more varying ideas than any other system. Since the Venus Project advocates a scientific method, I believe people will be checking all kinds of things that they've never even entertained in the past. The scientific world offers a great many more variables on apparatus, devices, extensions of human attributes than any other system I know of.
And especially when things are made available to people to be able to learn or partake in anything they want, people dare not dream today because they can't afford to fulfill those dreams. In an environment where you have access to goods and services and education and medical care, and you're encouraged to participate because the contributions will enhance everyone's life and be put into society directly, there would be many more challenges and excitement, much more opportunity that way. Are you aware of the vortex-based mathematics?
What's your question about it?
Or if so, what do you think about it? Are you aware of it?
Yes, I'm aware of it. What is your question?
What do you think about it? The vortex-based mathematics and Marco Rodin.
Well, to some aspect, every extensional device in mathematics can be useful if applied in a given area. But mathematics as a system alone, mathematics as a tool, learning how to use it wisely is the problem. I'm not sure that people know how to use it wisely. Like investment bankers might use it for their own personal gain, and that isn't using things wisely. The more scientists, the more engineers, the better educated people, the richer the society. In a society where every man works for himself, every industry tries to maintain the competitive edge, we hurt humanity as a whole.
This person wants to know what diet you eat and what diet you propose for healthy living, and will it be implemented in the Venus Project?
It isn't what I propose, it's what people pick and what they make available. When nutritional studies are made without the need for profit, when nutritional studies are made purely on the basis of survival and maintaining a healthy body and a healthy mind, whatever research determines in the future, they will run experiments. There'll be no genetic engineering without a long-term test system. In other words, you cannot do genetic splicing without long-term testing to check the validity of the system that you intend to impose. No one can impose any system upon society without long-term testing.
What about junk food, as they call it today?
It will not be available in the future. You couldn't buy junk food.
You wouldn't make anything just to sell that is pumped up with things that are poisonous for people just to enhance the taste of it so people will buy it. Nothing that would be detrimental to people.
Would not be available.
That's right. Will there be a resource-based economy, something as a government or any institution that controls the resource management system? How would it be like? What would it be like?
You don't need government. What you need is information regarding food, information regarding taste and availability. When the public has access to information, they can better inform themselves as to what seems to promote healthy growth.
Can we reword, quote, goods and services, because there would be no services in a resource-based economy or property concepts? You think there should be another word for goods and services?
Yeah, and there's no servitude in the Venus Project. For example, there are no waitresses that wait on tables. What happens when you sit at a table, the menu lights up. Then it scans you. If you're diabetic, it adjusts the food to your conditions. You don't need anybody telling you what to do or where to go. The instruments that are used to enhance people's lives, not abuse them.
But the terms goods and services, do you think that should be reworded? Do you think that's too much of a commercial?
No, most things that are available are used to enhance people's lives. There's nothing available like guns, machine guns, anti-aircraft guns, or weapon systems because it's not studied. In its place, we study how to bridge the difference between nations, how not to kill people, how to resolve problems, not to get into arguments, how to not encourage physical violence as a method of entertainment. Children are brought up differently in the future. There are no people given medals for shooting down airplanes. In other words, the whole system is reversed.
What's the best place in the world at this moment to start a prototype Venus Project city?
I don't think there is a best place. When people are ready for it, they will install it. If they're not ready for it, you'll never see it. It depends on how much work you do to help change people's way of thinking. It has nothing to do with the Venus Project. It only has to do with the effort you put out to help change people. So if you don't put the load of the problem upon Roxanne and Jacque to make the motion picture, we need financial support. We need people that operate computers that can help generate the images for the motion picture. We need your support. We cannot do it alone. People say, well, why are you collecting money since you don't believe in a money system? We live in a money system. There's no way to make a motion picture. There's no way to put out books and videotapes without spending money today. I don't think it is fair to put it on Roxanne and Jacque alone. I think that all people should participate in this work.
Yes, and we thank everybody who's doing that, because there are a lot of people who are working really hard in this direction as well. Under what conditions would you and the group of scientists supporting a resource-based economy be willing to move to Venezuela to develop and put to practice all the technology involved in a resource-based economy center or model city?
We will go anywhere in the world that wants to install the Venus Project. We will help out in every way that we can. Any country that wants to try to build an experimental city to test the validity of the Venus Project proposals, from China to Siam, any place.
Yes, we've been trying to get a hold of Chavez too, but we have no connection to him, but we think he may be interested in hearing about this direction. Ideally, we'd love to unite a lot of the progressive countries in Latin America. They might be more willing to hear this or even try to do a first city jointly and get the benefits of the research center within that city.
We have no fixed notions of the future. We will try different systems in different countries if they're willing, but they cannot dictate the policy of the Venus Project. The Venus Project is a method for bringing all the nations together without the need for armies, navies, police, or prisons. We believe that people that are aberrated are produced that way by the culture they live in. We believe that the environment that people live in make criminals, serial killers. There's no such thing as bad people or good people any more than such a thing as a good dog or a bad dog. If a dog leads the blind to the streets, they were trained to lead the blind. If a dog helps people, if a dog is favorable toward people, it's because it's been brought up in an environment with a lot of people around, feeding the dog and taking care of the dog. So the dog gets used to a lot of people. But you can raise a dog to tear soldiers to pieces, or to help soldiers, or to bring medical supplies to soldiers. It is not the dog, it's the environment they're reared in. That's psychology today. They work on people. It's the environment that shapes their behavior. If you work on people, they go back into the same environment that reinforces worn-out systems that were designed hundreds of years ago. It's not a science. It's an art. The same with psychiatry. Psychiatrists work on people. It's the environment that shaped their behavior. You should be collectively working on improving the environment to eradicate or outgrow the need for aberrant behavior.
End of Part 1.